Artie Blanco, welcome to 13 Action News. Thanks for coming on. So let's talk about, first, just let people know, I know you through your work with the AFL-CIO, but now you're with a group called For Our Future in Nevada. Tell people what that is.
So For Our Future is a national organization, and we're investing in 5 states. We're working with partner organizations in states to make sure that we're doing civic engagement and important areas that will decide the election this year.
When you say civic engagement, I mean, are you doing grassroots stuff?
Yep.
Are you doing any ads, mail pieces? What kind of engagement are you doing?
Well, we're doing communication door to door. We're doing the good old-fashioned door-to-door campaign. We're doing that with our organization internally, but then we also have funded local organizations that are doing the same, reaching out to their constituencies and their groups, and really talking about what are the important issues that families in Las Vegas are continuing to struggle with and why it's important for them to participate in this year's election.
It's essentially a Democratic super PAC. Is that fair?
It's a progressive super PAC, yes.
Here we go. Here we go. But you're trying to get voters organized, engaged in battleground states, correct?
Yes, correct.
That's okay.
Correct.
So let's talk about the issue of immigration, which is one that you've been engaged on for a long time through your activism. Tell me your reaction first to what happened yesterday, which was considered a dramatic moment in the presidential race when Donald Trump went down to Mexico, met with the president there, then came back, and totally different Donald Trump appeared in Arizona. Were you worried that Donald Trump, before what happened in Arizona, we'll get to that in a second, went down to Mexico, he's standing next to a head of state, looked quote unquote presidential as him. Were you worried that he was going to be able to change the narrative?
No.
Why not?
I'm not worried because it's not his character. He has no character. I think he has no integrity. I think that he is all about headlines, and I think that he is running this campaign like he does his reality TV shows. I'm not worried because his true colors will always come through in terms of who he really is and what he really thinks and what his ultimate goal is, which is just to build his brand.
You don't think he wants to win?
I don't think he really cares if he wants. I don't know. I honestly, I think about it. I don't know. I don't know what he's thinking. You know, I'm sure yes, I want to win because it's fun. It's something to do. I don't think he's taking it seriously.
You think he's frivolous? That's essentially what you're saying.
I think he's just not taking this seriously.
Well, you know what is serious, though? He's tapped into something, and you know it. If you heard that crowd, if you watched his speech last night in Arizona, which again was back to the frothing nativist Donald Trump, he's tapping into something, Artie Blanco, in this country that's out there. You have to be worried about that sentiment rising up, are you not?
Sure, I'm worried that there's more hate in this country. I'm worried that he's tapping into more hate and divisiveness within our communities and who we are as a people in America and what the beliefs are of this country that we all live and know and love in terms of how we are not a sense of community. Someone else and your neighbor is to blame. That's what I'm worried about. Yes, I am worried about that. And he's just continuing to pander to it, to the hate and the rhetoric. I'm worried about that. But I'm not worried about people seeing the true colors and that this is actually giving people the fire to participate and to turn out to vote. And that's where, at the end of the day, he may be able to activate that side, the alt-right, which I didn't even know was a thing, which is very scary. But I think it's really encouraging our voters, and not only that, just with the hate and the rhetoric, but he has no plan.
But I guess what I mean is that in Nevada, let's talk about Nevada, where you've been very active. You're active in the labor movement, in the Hispanic community. You understand those cohorts of voters. And yet in Nevada, where he should be getting crushed, I really think he should be getting crushed if you look at the demographics of the state. The race is close. You talk to Hillary Clinton's campaign, even they will acknowledge this is not a slam dunk. We're still considered a toss-up state. What is going on here that people are not leaning against him more than they are?
Well, first we have to think about where you're getting the information from, right? We always know that polls can't be trusted, and I think, especially in the state of Nevada.
You're not going to give me the no polls can be trusted. The only poll that counts is the one on election day. You're not going to come up with that.
I'm not going to say that because it's not about election day. It's about early vote, right? It's about our early vote.
Seriously.
But you're right. I mean, look, yes, it is still a tight race here, and I think it's just because people haven't really grasped the gravity of what a potential Trump presidency will look like. And people are hearing it. I think, honestly, like what we're hearing at the doors, when we talk to voters, they're just like, really? Like, this is really a thing? Like, he can really win? And yeah, we have to explain it to them. Yes, this is why you need to participate. This is why you need to show up. And I think that message is starting to resonate, especially with our target audience.
I want to talk about the U.S. Senate race in just a moment, but one more question about Trump. And that is, this ties into a little bit more with your background with the AFL-CIO. One of the reasons that he's been able to appeal to certain groups is his position on trade. Where he's been against NAFTA. He says NAFTA is destroying the American workers' free trade agreements. Do you talk to people in the labor movement who are buying that message? I bet you do.
Well, it's been a while, but you know, I've talked to a couple of members that are definitely concerned about the trade, his trade position, but Hillary's right there with the same on the trade. She's against TPP.
Suddenly?
Understands.
Come on.
It's not, well, it wasn't
she
suddenly.
said 25 times as she was Secretary of State that she liked TPP. That's convenience to
Well, that
woo
was
people
before
like
there was-
Artie Blanco.
Well, that was even before there was actually a proposal on it, before it was actually written out. Once it was, put out there, and so people can actually read it, then it's reading what it really does, and then, yeah, anybody can change their mind once they see it on paper, what it actually does.
You don't think she's just pandering to people like Artie Blanco?
No, I think the true effects of what NAFTA has done, I think that there really has been a concerted effort from her campaign and her people to really understand that, and they really have delved deep into it. I think the trade issue is definitely something that we're going to continue to follow. We still, have a fight to have in Congress, make sure nothing gets passed in the lame duck, which which the labor movement is continuing to do.
You don't think she just flips if she gets elected right back to where she was before?
No.
You don't?
No.
How come you hesitated so long? You're not sure.
Well, because at the end of the day, I'm still a realist, and there's always that 5% or 1% chance. But I feel like she's very convicted in where she is now. So yeah.
Let's talk about the Senate race, which
Yes.
is in some ways inextricably linked to the presidential race. And groups, Hispanic groups, labor groups have been very upset with Joe Heck. There's been a lot of protests. Joe Heck has not really distanced himself from Donald Trump that much. But even PolitiFact says that any attempts to say that his position on immigration is the same as Trump's is not fair. Heck is for a path to citizenship. Now, he's never, I know you're going to give that look. I hope we're getting that smirk. But the bottom line is he's never been able to vote on it because the bill never came up in the House. He has voted to defund DACA, and he's against the president's executive orders.
Right.
He has said he supports a version of the DREAM Act. He is no Donald Trump.
Well, I'm not saying he's a Donald Trump. What I say is that even though he says that's not my position, he still believes that Donald Trump should be president of the United States. And knowing his position and where he is on immigration, how could you support someone like that to be the president of the free world? And at the end of the day, let's talk about that a little bit, about his bill. I remember being one of the 6 people that met with him to first see his draft of his bill that he wanted to help dreamers. And
this is several years ago.
This was 2013.
2013,
this was
right?
3
I remember
years
this.
ago. This
Right.
was over 3 years ago. And I think I was going through all my own stuff. But here was the thing about him is he's presenting this to us as this is what I'm talking about putting together. This is my legislation. It's a whole draft, doesn't have a number on it. And he's telling us this is what I want to move forward. I remember asking him, what about the parents? Because at this point, we had already had DACA and DAPA. I'm thinking, why are you not putting something about the parents? Because it's the same family. Why not just help the entire family? And his response was always, Artie, we're never going to pass immigration reform. It has to be piecemeal. I'm like, okay, so if it takes 30 pieces of legislation, you think you're going to be able to pass 30 pieces of legislation when you can't even get a hearing on a bill that was passed by the U.S. Senate by over 60 senators. So why are you talking to leadership about passing that bill? Have a committee hearing. I worked in Congress. I understand the process. And he said, I don't have a link to the leadership, which was completely false.
What does that mean? What does that mean?
He said he didn't have power to tell the leadership or to request the leadership to do so. But yet he had the power to have Speaker Boehner at the time to come out here and do a fundraiser for him at the country club. So let's be real. I think what Joe Heck, he says one thing, he does another, and the other is nothing. It's pandering. He wants to have a meeting. So he had a meeting with us. He had a larger meeting. He just wanted to have meetings to say he was doing something. when a couple of the organizations and activists, other activists on immigration here in Nevada went to DC, they met with Cantor's office, and they asked Eric Cantor's office, like, what about Joe Heck's bill?
He was the majority leader at the time, in case people forget.
Yes, exactly.
Go ahead.
And what about Joe Heck's bill? Cantor's office replied, what do you mean Joe Heck's bill? And they knew nothing about it. They were even upset with the fact that Joe Heck was negotiating or putting together legislation without even consulting the leadership.
But think about what you're saying. Let's be fair here. Let's look at I'll play devil's advocate. You're talking about a congressman who was elected in 2010. What is a congressman? So he had been elected again in 2012 after this had happened. So a guy who's been elected twice, you think the guy, you know how Congress works, you just said it. He has no power, right? So let me just finish playing devil's advocate. At least he was willing to meet with you and talk about these issues. What's wrong with that? What more could he have done?
Meeting isn't enough. Action. Words
what
are
could he have
words
done,
are
what
one
I'm
thing.
saying is a guy who was just
he could have done. He never did any 1-minute speeches. He never got on the floor and did
You want to give a
speeches.
speech like that's going to do any good?
And actually have meetings with leadership, and request that. Why can't we have a committee hearing? Why can't we actually request that? To not even be able to do that. Yes, you're right. Maybe he. At the end of the day, he didn't do anything more than just show us a piece of legislation that he worked on, that he put together a memo on, which was helpful. And I remember being in the meeting like, I appreciate the time you're spending on this, but what about everybody else? What about the rest of the family? What are you going to do about CIR? Because there is a bill that has a very likelihood of passing Congress, and he didn't even want to push for a vote.
CIR, in case you talk the jargon,
Sorry,
comprehensive immigration reform, in case people don't know.
Yep.
But I guess what I'm wondering is that he said all the right things in that meeting, right? He was for, except for, I remember the issue about the parents coming up at the time, and I remember the real issue at the time, I remember the Boehner visit, and the complaint was, why not call out John Boehner? He's the speaker at the time. Why not actually stand up there and call out your leadership for not bringing a bill to the floor that a lot of people at the time, Artie Blanco, I remember, think would have passed.
Yes,
but that John Boehner was, that's what you really think Heck should have done back then, right? Is spoken out against the leadership.
That's one of the things. I think spoken against the leadership, but at the same time urge the leadership, why aren't we doing this? And call them out, for sure. Definitely for not having a hearing and not doing more on it. But at the end of the day, again, the fact that he still believes that we have to have 50 pieces of legislation or 20 pieces of legislation in order to get immigration reform with the Congress that we have now, that's just never going to happen.
Well, you're never going to get comprehensive immigration reform.
Not with the Congress now.
With the Congress. But I mean, his argument was, let's try to do this in different pieces. At least get some of the pieces passed. Why doesn't that make sense from a legislative standpoint?
Because there was already a bill that had everything, that covered everything, and that Republicans in the Senate voted for.
Dean Heller, in fact, the senator from Nevada, voted for. Heck said he didn't like the Senate. He liked a lot of the things. Correct me if I'm wrong. He said he liked a lot of the things in the Senate bill, but would not have voted for it because he didn't like the border security provisions, I believe.
No, he said he wouldn't vote for it because it was one big bill. It was a town hall that I attended in his district, and I pressed him on it, and it was, he had just flown back from D.C., and he actually said that he had read the bill while he was on the flight, and that he didn't think that he was going to vote for it because of that reason. But the interesting thing that you're saying now, because I'm trying to remember now, this was a few years ago, is that you're right. He did mention something about the border security, but there was actually an amendment that was added to that Senate bill that finally passed that strengthened border security and that increased border security. So there was really nothing for him to say that it was because of the border security pieces that he didn't like about the bill.
Well, let's cut through everything. We only have a couple minutes left. Even if Joe Heck said everything that you wanted to hear, you would never support him because he's a Republican. You would be supporting Catherine Cortez Masto because she's a Democrat who says all the right things. She has no record on immigration that we know of. You don't know what she's going to do, but she says everything that you want to hear. This is purely partisan on your part, is it not?
No, it's not partisan because I truly believe that Catherine Cortez Masto would be a better senator in representing Nevada and all Nevadans, not just a certain subsect. But so it's not just about partisan because I think he truly, at the end of the day, when he was a state senator, he wasn't who he is and who he says he is today.
What does that mean?
So he said a lot more things at the time that were on record. Like he didn't think birthright citizenship should continue. He called for it to be ended. This was when he was making the jump to Congress.
Now he says but should be part of the discussion, maybe.
Yeah, he still talks about it, and
right.
And that's where at the end of the day, like he's just still out of touch with the actual voters and the citizens here in Nevada.
It's not partisan. If he,
No, it's not partisan.
Tell me the names of the Republicans that For Our Future is supporting.
Well, that's not, we're here just to talk about the presidential election and the U.S. Senate race. So that's what I'm here to talk about, and that we need a Congress that's actually going to work with the president that actually wants to move this, to move this country forward and not take it back.
All right. Artie Blanco, it's been a pleasure having you here.
Thanks for
coming in.
Thanks for having me.
All right.